What if I told you the most profound masterpiece ever created isn't hanging in the Louvre,
Right.
and it wasn't painted by some tortured, brooding genius either? What if the highest form of art is actually like a biological software update, one that you can download into your brain tonight just by keeping your mind awake while your body falls asleep?
I mean, it sounds completely like science fiction, but it is deeply rooted in ancient practice.
Yeah.
Today, we're pulling from a really fascinating set of excerpts titled The Science of Meditation / The Art of Meditation. And our mission for this deep dive is to explore this super unexpected intersection.
Definitely.
We're going to look at how human emotion, the mechanics of making art, and the literal practice of sleep state consciousness are all just intimately woven together.
It's wild because the premise of this text completely rewrites our standard understanding of what it means to be cultured. I mean, we usually think of art as this external thing.
Right, like a canvas or a sculpture.
Exactly, a performance, a physical object. But this text argues that art is primarily an internal mechanism. And understanding that fundamentally changes how you interact with your own mind.
Yeah, to get to that internal mechanism, though, we first have to establish the boundary of what we're actually talking about. The text introduces this British philosopher, Robin George Collingwood, specifically his work, The Principles of Art.
Okay, let's unpack this because his definition is intense.
It really is. Collingwood cuts through centuries of vague aesthetic debates with this brilliantly ruthless definition. He states that art is strictly and entirely the expression of human emotions.
Which seems simple on the surface, but it has massive implications because of what it aggressively excludes, right?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. By tying art exclusively to emotional sensibility, Collingwood draws this hard, impenetrable line between art and pure rational expression. Science, mathematics, functional engineering.
Because those rely on logic and objective truth.
Exactly. They actively avoid emotional bias.
Right.
The text uses Albert Einstein's E=mc² to illustrate this divide. The equation is undeniably elegant. It possesses a profound simplicity that you see in great masterpieces,
Sure.
but it explains the mechanical reality of the universe. It does not express the human emotional experience of living in that universe. The equation doesn't care if you feel awe or terror at the concept of mass energy equivalence. It just is.
That makes so much sense. It's like looking at the architectural blueprints of a skyscraper versus standing inside a magnificent cathedral.
I like that.
Both are brilliant, right? But only one is designed specifically to make you feel awe or even fear.
Yes, and we can take this a step further. If art is purely the expression of human emotion, then a concert pianist playing a mathematically flawless, technically perfect sonata while feeling absolutely nothing inside one.
Wait, by Collingwood's definition, that wouldn't be art.
Exactly. They're not actually creating art. They're just executing a highly complex physical formula. Meanwhile, a toddler banging their fists on those exact same piano keys in a state of genuine, unbridled rage. That is art.
Wow, okay, that completely shifts the paradigm.
It does, and it leads to a critical realization regarding our own lives. Art does not require beauty. We frequently conflate aesthetics with art, but if human emotion is vastly complex and often ugly, then art can be anything that successfully externalizes a feeling.
So a piece that evokes sharp pain or intense anxiety or just a strange, unsettling confusion is succeeding at its primary function.
Yes, which means your ability to appreciate or create art is entirely dependent on the size of your emotional vocabulary.
Right.
If you navigate the world only experiencing broad, blunt emotions, like just basic happiness, sadness, or anger,
Or like primary colors.
exactly, then your experience of art and, frankly, your experience of reality is severely bottlenecked. The broader and more nuanced your emotional bandwidth becomes, the greater your capacity for artistic sensibility. You need complex emotional receptors to decode complex emotional expressions.
But this brings up a massive logistical problem. If we need a vast emotional vocabulary to really experience art, how do we acquire it?
Right.
Because the cultural trope we've built around artists is that you have to go out into the world and suffer. You have to live dangerously, break your heart, court chaos.
Be the starving artist.
Yeah, expose yourself to trauma just to feel something new.
And what's fascinating here is the source text offers a radical pivot from that exact idea. It presents meditation not just as a relaxation tool, but as the ultimate risk-free mechanism for generating entirely new emotional states.
So it's a life hack for emotions.
Literally, yes.
Yeah.
It is a method to radically enrich your emotional vocabulary while ensuring the experience remains fundamentally positive, all without requiring you to engage with worldly chaos.
Okay, let's break down the actual mechanics of this. because Chapter 4 of the text gets very specific about how this works.
It does.
The essence of meditation is described as the practice of maintaining acute mental consciousness while allowing the physical body to fall asleep.
Yeah, to understand how this works mechanically, we have to look at what happens when you sit to meditate. You are deliberately lowering your heart rate and entering a hypnagogic state. As your body approaches sleep, a sort of sensory gating occurs.
Like your body turns off the incoming data?
Exactly. Your peripheral nervous system stops sending constant updates about the temperature of the room or the feeling of gravity or that itch on your arm. The brain is starved of its usual physical inputs, yet your consciousness remains blazing brightly.
Because we usually experience the mind-awake and body-awake states as a mandatory package deal,
Right.
our emotional range is just permanently tethered to physical reality. But when you sever that tie, when the mind stays alert but the physical world drops away, the brain starts generating its own internal emotional stimuli.
Yes. And if standard working life is like painting with those primary colors we talked about, entering this mind-awake, body-asleep state is like suddenly discovering the existence of ultraviolet light.
Oh, wow.
You are accessing an entirely new spectrum of feeling. The text lists emotions that are generated in this state, states of being so foreign to our waking life
Right.
that standard language actually fails to capture them.
So we have to use proxy words.
Right. Words like calmness, profound serenity, absolute freedom, deep compassion, and a very specific type of emptiness.
I really want to highlight that word emptiness, because in Western culture, we usually view emptiness as a void, like a lack of something.
negative.
Exactly. But the text frames this as a positive emptiness. It is expansive. It is the feeling of vast internal space. You're essentially experiencing flavors of existence that are physiologically inaccessible while your nervous system is bogged down by the physical world.
So the inevitable question becomes, what happens when a practitioner takes that ultraviolet light? These completely new, entirely positive emotions cultivated in a sensory void, and shines it back onto the physical world.
Well, according to the text, that application is the very foundation of Eastern wisdom and Eastern arts. It is a deep, rational contemplation of humanity and the universe, but one that emerges exclusively from those meditative emotional states.
It is the perfect fusion of rationality and sensitivity.
Yeah, and we see varied ratios of this fusion throughout human history anyway. Like pure rational expression is the E equals MC squared. Pure emotional expression might be a Jackson Pollock painting, where it's just raw feeling.
Right.
But most human creations blend the two. The text points to a 10,000-year-old carved wooden bowl. The bowl itself represents rational function, the need to hold water, but the ornate, intricate carvings on the outside represent pure emotional expression.
The text actually jumps to a modern example to prove this isn't just an ancient phenomenon either. Steve Jobs and the iPhone.
Oh yeah, that's a great example.
Right. The internal silicon architecture, the programming logics, the circuitry. That is the sheer rational ingenuity of the engineering team. But the user interface, the elegant curvature, the intuitive physics of the screen scrolling, that reflects Jobs' personal emotional expression, which was heavily influenced by his documented study of Zen design.
That's incredible.
But Eastern arts take this fusion to its absolute limit. They aren't just influenced by a general sense of emotion. They're explicitly engineered around the literal practice of meditation. The text dives deeply into the architecture of traditional Japanese gardens to illustrate this.
Which are rooted in Shinto and Buddhist philosophy, right?
Yes. These spaces feature asymmetrical layouts, carefully pruned evergreen trees, meticulously placed rocks, and raked gravel.
Wait, I push back on this garden concept a little bit, though.
Oh yeah? How so?
Because if art is supposed to express raw human emotion, like we established with Collingwood earlier, a perfectly raked bed of gravel feels incredibly sterile to me. It feels like a spreadsheet made of rocks, you know? It feels like absolute control, which is the total opposite of raw, messy emotion.
Well, it looks like control to the waking mind because it intentionally deprives the waking mind of what it wants. The text highlights a crucial detail here. These gardens specifically lack flowering plants.
Which is super jarring if you are used to Western landscaping where the entire objective is just a riot of blooming color everywhere.
Exactly. Western gardens stimulate the waking emotional mind. They are loud and demanding. The Japanese garden utilizes static muted elements precisely because it is not trying to entertain your visual cortex.
Oh, I see.
The rocks, symbolizing immovable mountains, and the raked gravel symbolizing flowing water, are tools. By removing the loud stimuli of blooming flowers, the environment forces the mind inward, inducing that state of positive emptiness. For an experienced monk, the garden is an interactive lever to access those profound, ultraviolet emotional states.
Okay, that makes total sense. We've established that the absence of flowers forces the mind inward, but sitting on a veranda looking at static gravel is inherently passive.
True.
The true test of this cultivated emotional vocabulary is whether you can maintain that expansive emptiness while in motion. And here's where it gets really interesting, because that is exactly the challenge the Japanese tea ceremony known as Sado attempts to solve.
The tea ceremony is perhaps the ultimate manifestation of meditative art. It was brought to Japan by monks who had studied in Tang, China, fusing the philosophy of Zen with the physical act of preparing tea. They mapped their internal meditative states directly onto physical kinematics.
The text outlines 4 core pillars of the ceremony, right?
Yes. Wa, representing harmony between humans and nature. Kei, a deep mutual respect for all things. Sei, the purity of mind achieved in a Zen state. And Jaku, profound tranquility.
So the tea master isn't simply pouring hot water. Having spent years cultivating serenity while their body slept, they're projecting that exact internal architecture outward. The timing of the whisk, the angle of the wrist, the deliberate placement of the bowl, it is a real-time broadcast of their nervous system.
The author actually quotes an artist from the Meiji period named Okakura Kakuzo, who stated that the true tea master strove to be something more than the artist. They strove to be art itself.
Basically creating the world's earliest, purest form of performance art.
Right. But performance art carries an inherent tragedy, which the text identifies as the root cause of a massive modern crisis within the discipline of Saido. When the tea master dies, the artwork completely vanishes.
Because it doesn't endure like a carved bowl or a painting.
Exactly. The raw, genuine emotion that powered the ceremony is extinguished with them.
So the modern practitioners are left with this massive void. And to fill it, they meticulously copy the surviving rules. They replicate the exact angle of the pour, the strict etiquette, the exact layout of the tatami mats, just desperately trying to recreate the atmosphere of the past masters.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, they are executing the choreography without hearing the music. The text introduces a scathing critique by Soetsu Yanagi, a renowned theorist of folk crafts.
What does he say?
Yanagi argues that modern ceremonies have entirely lost their soul. They have devolved from a creative spiritual expression into a rigid, hollow ritual.
It's like walking down an office hallway and asking a coworker, "Hey, how are you?" And they automatically reply, "Fine, thanks."
Right, exactly.
You are both performing the accepted choreography of a conversation, but the actual human emotion behind the exchange is completely dead.
Yes.
Yanagi argues that the tea ceremony has become just that. A dead performance used merely as a showcase for elaborate teaware, intentionally dividing people based on wealth and status instead of fostering the deep equality it originally intended.
Yanagi's critique highlights a fundamental truth about art. You cannot reverse engineer it. You cannot start with the physical expression, the etiquette, the perfectly whisked matcha, and hope it magically generates the internal emotion of tranquility.
It has to go the other way around.
Exactly.
So the solution the text provides for saving the tea ceremony and related arts like ikebana flower arranging or kendo swordsmanship is pretty blunt. Practitioners must prioritize deep meditation over etiquette.
The raw emotion must precede the physical expression.
If a tea master hasn't spent the time to actually go inside, sever the physical senses, and experience that ultraviolet serenity, they have no emotion to express. They aren't doing art.
The essence of the art resides exclusively in the emotional payload. Without the meditation to generate that payload, the art is simply dead mechanics.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? Most of us aren't training to be tea masters.
Speak for yourself.
True. But we generally don't have carefully raped gravel gardens in our backyards either. How does redefining art as an emotional payload and using sleep state consciousness to generate it provide a practical tool for everyday existence?
Well, the text transitions to a deeply practical application by bringing in Alain de Botton's philosophy from his book Art as Therapy. De Botton proposes that art's primary function shouldn't be historical or aesthetic. It should be therapeutic. He argues that engaging with profound works of art provides us with emotional containers. These containers help us manage the intense, unavoidable tensions of modern life, from financial panic and romantic heartbreak to the sheer terror of our own mortality.
I see. So if you stand in front of a massive, imposing steel sculpture, the overwhelming physical weight of it might give you a temporary container for your own massive, unarticulated grief.
Yes.
The art validates your internal disorder. It acts as a therapeutic external tool.
But the author of our text takes de Botton's premise and escalates it. If external art acts as therapy by providing borrowed emotional containers, then the internal practice of meditation surpasses even the greatest external artwork.
Because you aren't borrowing anything.
Exactly. In the hypnagogic state of meditation,
Yeah.
you aren't borrowing someone else's emotional expression. You are building your own emotional architecture.
You are conversing directly with your own psychology. The text describes this inward journey as a systematic method for releasing the inevitable traumas of life. But practically speaking, the concept of letting go often triggers a deep fear.
It really does.
There is a very real anxiety that if we systematically detach from our deep emotional memories, we might become entirely numb. We might accidentally delete our capacity for joy and love while trying to erase the pain.
And the text specifically addresses that fear. The meditative release isn't about lobotomizing your memories or becoming cold. It is about systematically detaching the physiological panic from the psychological memory.
Wow, that's a vital distinction.
Right. In that mind-awake, body-asleep state, you can finally observe a past trauma without your waking heart rate spiking. You observe your sorrows, your pains, and even your intense attachments to temporary pleasures. And you release the biological grip they have on your nervous system one by one.
So you aren't becoming numb at all. You are clearing out the unprocessed data of the past.
Exactly.
By releasing those localized attachments, you restore your baseline emotional bandwidth. You actually increase your capacity for joy because your nervous system isn't constantly exhausting itself maintaining old psychological defenses.
Yes, finding this profound inner peace, as the text claims, provides the exact vocabulary required to appreciate the art of your own daily life. It fundamentally rewires how you experience reality.
We have covered immense ground today. We started by ruthlessly redefining art, stripping away aesthetics, to reveal it simply as the raw expression of human emotion.
Yeah.
We unpacked the physiological mechanics of meditation, discovering how starving the brain of waking physical input generates an entirely new spectrum of positive emotions. We explored how those emotions built Eastern traditions, from flowerless static gardens to the profound kinematic performance of the tea ceremony.
And finally, we saw how utilizing this practice can act as a targeted internal therapy to detach physiological panic from our past traumas. It's a really remarkable framework. And the text leaves us with a provocative implication to ponder. It argues that meditation unlocks entirely new emotional states, states so radically different from our waking lives that our current language cannot adequately describe them. If art is strictly the expression of human emotion, imagine what completely uncharted, revolutionary new forms of art might emerge if an entire generation learned to access those hidden meditative emotions and project them into the physical world. What would that art even look like? What would it sound like?
That is the ultimate question, because the only way to find out what that art looks like or what it feels like to possess that vast ultraviolet emotional vocabulary is to generate it yourself. The blueprint is there. All you have to do is find a quiet spot, close your eyes, and see what happens when the body sleeps but the mind stays awake. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.